Juck. We are not bemoaning the noon kickoff. We are now owning it. It's a badge of honor. We're the lunatic fringe that defines our coach's legacy when it comes to this game. They don't get to define that outside the family. We're cut from a different cloth for Ohioans. He's got it all, man. He's even got the jaw. You know the jaw. You see that jaw and you're just like, yeah, man, that's a dude. Do I want Michigan to beat Oklahoma? No way in hell. I don't know what world I'm living in. This is insane to me. And if you saw my outburst, I apologize. It's showtime now. It is showtime. Thank you so much for joining me. Intro wars in the comments section. To intro or not to intro, that is the question. Some really like it, feel like it sets the tone. Others have really liked the way I've just been getting straight to it. Let me know what you think. 3 days away from the national championship game. I don't get the impression there are that many people excited about this thing. And I think that they have made a disaster of this playoff. They've made a disaster of it. Heard a lot of people last year when Ohio State and Notre Dame were playing in the national championship game saying that they weren't too interested. There wasn't a lot of interest. Not Notre Dame or Ohio State fans, but people around the country. And I'm sitting here, obviously our opinions on it were skewed. Our favorite team was in it. But I couldn't believe that anybody would not be interested in Ohio State and Notre Dame playing for a national championship. If nothing else, than to root for an upset, right? Because Ohio State was an 8-point favorite or 8.5-point favorite. And it just didn't make sense to me. But now as we're watching this one unfold, the national championship game, an unbelievable amount of intrigue just as a one-off, from an intrigue level, the Indiana story, potentially the culmination of the greatest single turnaround in college football history, right? Then you got the Miami story, which somehow kind of feels like a feel-good story. My number 3 most hated program in the history of college football, that's Miami, somehow almost feels like a feel-good story, and I don't even know how that's possible. But they both kind of do. Nonetheless, it's just a very intriguing game, and I feel like putting 10 days between games is just killing the intrigue of the games. When I think of the Indiana-Alabama game, it feels like it was a month and a half ago. And it's just too long. It's way too long. And they also did it combined with what we've now seen as the wildest portal in college football ever. And there were at one point like 4,500 guys entering into the portal. So if you're a fan of another program that's not playing in the national championship game, you're dealing with a whole lot of turnover on your team, most likely. And you're focused on what's going on with your team in roster construction instead of getting pumped up for the game, which again is Monday if you hadn't caught wind. So we're going to get to the end of the portal signings here pretty soon. And we're going to get to the national championship on Monday. And then things are going to go dark for a while. Not going to be a lot of news, not going to be a ton of intrigue. We're not going to have a lot to take our mind off of the monotonous off season. I did like the spring portal that put in a little something for us to talk about in the spring that we're not going to have this year. But at any rate, as far as we go for the Buckeyes, we did lose another guy today. But we got 2 guys coming in, number 16 and number 17. And let's talk about the first one. Well, first, let's like the show. That's very important. More important than you think to do that for all your favorite creators. And I do appreciate all the new viewers, all the new subscribers we've gotten over the past 3-4 months. The support has been truly unbelievable, and I am very grateful. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so for your guy. I know it's annoying to have to ask for that, but it is really, really important that you do that for all your favorite creators on YouTube and all your favorite folks. It's just it's the way to let YouTube know how to filter out the crap on YouTube and recommend the good stuff that people put forth good work and good content out. So please subscribe if you have not yet. And we have got some interesting data here, some interesting trends that I want to go over how Ohio State did this one compared to how they've done it before. As we talked with, well, let's start with our addition. Number 1 is Kyle Parker. And we talked about Kyle Parker the other day on the show. I think they're going to go Kyle Parker. I think we're going to really like Kyle Parker. I want you to listen to what LSU folks have to say about Kyle Parker.
Still need to see what happens with Kyle Parker. Kyle Parker has announced his intention to enter the transfer portal. But I mean, y'all, I don't know about you. I would sure Love to have Kyle Parker back. But early in the season, when LSU was looking for somebody to stretch the field with, Kyle Parker was really one of the only guys in 2024 early that you could accomplish that with.
That makes me feel really good. Feel really good about Kyle Parker, who I do think there's a pretty decent chance ends up a Buckeye. If he is, I'll be pretty happy. So Kyle Parker does end up a Buckeye. I am pretty happy. And you notice what he says there, stretch the field. Now, Kyle Parker, a guy who is playing obviously for our new wide receiver coach, Cortez Hankton. And Cortez Hankton, usually when we see these, position coaches go to a new school, you generally get at least one guy that's attached to them if it is around the portal time. And this is our guy. We get Kyle Parker, Cortez Hankton's guy. We didn't get anybody from Tyler Bowen, didn't get anybody from Oregon when Carlos Loughlin came in, but we did get Isaiah West, who was a recruit he was in on that never would have been at Ohio State if not for Carlos Loughlin. We get one of Hank's guys, and this is a dude who really helps. I think he helps a lot. And when we talked about him the other day, when we talked about him and Jacoby Jackson the other day, two guys that Ohio State was pursuing that I really thought were very good fits. I think Kyle Parker is a really good fit. Kyle Parker, a teammate of Peyton Pierce at Lovejoy in Texas. And if you've never seen this, this is a picture of Peyton and Kyle Parker in high school. Wait till you see this. There is Peyton, number 26. There's Kyle Parker, number 1 at Lovejoy, Texas. And I absolutely love it. There are some schools around the country, obviously, that wear a straight ripoff of a college uniform. I love when we see an Ohio State kid who wore the Ohio State ripoff uniform in high school. Shout out to Lovejoy. That is awesome. And those now 2 Buckeyes as they move on up and get the official Buckeye jersey. Now, coming out of high school, we're talking about a 4-star, 330th ranked player in the country, sub 11 second 100 meter, 23.04 200 meters. So he's a fast guy. At LSU, 70% of his receptions came from the slot, but we did just hear our guy there who said when they were looking for someone early in the field who could stretch the field, Kyle Parker was their guy. I don't think anybody is going to characterize the current Ohio State slot receiver, Brandon Inniss, as someone, when you were looking for a guy to stretch the field, Brandon Inniss stretched the field. So a bit of a different skill set, a guy who the same size, but is certainly faster and more of a deep pass threat. I also think he is just a little quicker and shiftier, and in the slot can get you more yards after catch. Now, he didn't last year. They both got 5.2 on the nose yards after reception, which, obviously you can't prove based on the numbers that Parker is better than Inniss at that. But just watching them play, it certainly seems like in the Ohio State offense, you could have a slot receiver. We know you can't have a slot receiver who does a lot more in the Ohio State offense. And that certainly wasn't Brandon last year. Could it be Parker this upcoming year? Potentially. When we look at the wide receiver room, and we'll pull it up here in a second, it's an interesting room the way it's shaped up now. Is you brought in 2 transfers, you lost 2 guys heading out. So let's pull it up and take a look right now when we look at zone 6. And the interesting thing when we look at it is Jeremiah Smith is your true X. Chris Henry Jr. also a true X. But Chris Henry Jr., too good to sit on the bench this year. When you're going to play him, you're not going to put Jeremiah on the bench to play him. So you're going to play him across from JJ a lot. Now, who's going to be the starter over there? I think it'll start off at least with Devin McEwen. That's the transfer from UTSA, who is he's a little bit taller than Parker, not much taller, maybe 6 foot, 6'1". So he'll probably start at Z opposite Jeremiah with Chris Henry Jr. spelling him. And Chris, you'll have to teach both Z and X, because when JJ needs a break, Chris will go over on the other side of the field. I think we'll see a lot of Chris. I think he'll pick things up pretty fast, and they will want to play him a lot. Then in the slot, you've got a lot of options, clearly. You got BI, you got Kyle Parker. Who's going to be the guy who starts there? Well, BI is a captain. And look, it just matters. I don't know what to say. It matters. But if Kyle Parker is clearly the better player, he's going to play more. But then when we go a little further down the list, you've got a lot of guys who you could characterize here as a, purely slot guy, and like Des Jones, Jaden Ricketts, Brock. I know they want Brock to play the slot, and Phil at about 6'1", but not a burner. I don't really know where Phil fits best. Phil only played one snap last year, got a lot of promise. And if we're just talking about the young guys, to me, Phil Bell and Brock Boyd are the two best of the young guys, the two most promising of the young guys. Brock, when we talk about Kyle Parker being a speedy guy, Kyle Parker with a 23.04 best 200 meter. Let me get Brock's here. Hang on just a second. 21.69. Brock Boyd is an absolute burner. And I've seen one of his races, and it was just hysterical, man. The guy is beating guys by 10 yards down in Texas, and he goes to South Lake. So big time Texas track meets, smoking everybody. Absolute burner. And Jaden Ricketts pretty fast too. Des Jones, 5'10", Brock Boyd, 6'1". I mean, it's just like Phil Bell, Brock Boyd. I think either of them we could see get some substantial run here in a rotation. And then at Z, freshman Jerquaden Guilford as well is a guy who just stole the show at the Navy All-American game. 3 days, he got the dude of the day, the alpha dog of the day. 3 separate days, they practice, and then play the game. Jerquaden Guilford absolutely dominated. He was the best looking receiver there, and Chris Henry Jr. was there. So Jerquaden Guilford, by the way, physically ready as well at 6'2", muscled up. Definitely a guy that we're going to see get on the field this year. So when we look at that rotation, I mean, I feel pretty good about it now. I feel pretty good about it. Is it the best in the country anymore? No, it's not the best in the country unless you're look, maybe you could make a case for that to say, look, I got the very best guy and he's so much better that he's going to make Devin McEwen all that much better. And Devin McEwen, remember, that's a guy who went 40 receptions, 45 receptions, 60 receptions. He's fast. I think his speed is a little overblown, but we'll see, man. I like it. I think it's shaped together nicely. I like the pieces that they added. Yeah, Cam Coleman would have been great. When we look at this, there's always somebody out there that we would have said, yeah, we would have preferred that guy. But with what they invested and with the incoming freshmen, I think you got a pretty solid room here with crazy upside. What if Chris Henry comes in and just pops, man? What if he blows? And he could. He absolutely could. So a very nice room, and pretty excited about it. Excited to see it all shake out. Excited to see these guys in spring. So let's go to the other side of the ball. As Ohio State loses transfer portal dude number 33, Cody Haddad. Cody Haddad from Cleveland St. Ignatius just finished his freshman year. Came in as a safety blue chip prospect and a guy who we did not have a ton of film on as he was injured. I think a lot of his junior year, some of his senior year, he just only played a couple of games. I really like Cody as a football player, really fast, hits like a ton of bricks, but he's just small. He's narrow. His hips are narrow. He's not very tall. And the Buckeyes took kind of a flyer on him, I think, hoping he would grow, and not just muscularly, but just everything. His frame, his bone structure, just a little small, man. I think he's going to be a great football player at a slightly lower level than Ohio State. And maybe he ends up being such a good football player on the field that he gets called back up to the highest level of college football. I'm certainly rooting for him. That's a dude who's, his dad, Drew Haddad, was a star at St. Ignatius, then I think Buffalo. Then he played in the NFL for the Colts. His grandfather played in the NFL as well. His younger brother is a wide receiver at St. Ignatius, and he's got the height, and he's actually getting a lot of top tier interest now. So sucks to see him go. He was a guy that I was hoping at some point he hit that growth spurt and could see the field, but definitely not someone you were ever banking on. He wasn't in the plans. So number 33 out. And also that is the 7th member of the class of 2025. which is just unbelievable. If you told me that when we wrapped up the class of 2025, I would have said you're absolutely insane, but 7 of them gone already. And the portal class, the guys coming in, we now have 16, 17 guys, but one's a long snapper. So really 16 guys. That's mean. 17 guys. And when we talk about these guys, every single one of these guys is either a guy who is going to start or be in the 2 deep and see the field, except for maybe one. Ohio State in the past, we saw bring in some guys in their portal class, a decent portion of them were guys that were kind of like an extension of recruiting, guys that had several years of eligibility left, who hadn't really seen the field yet at their previous stop. And they were basically coming in, and you could just kind of characterize them as kind of a recruit. They were coming in to be developed at Ohio State, and Ohio State did not focus on that at all in this class of 2026. That is not what they wanted, but they did have an opportunity to bring in one of those guys, and they went ahead and did that and brought in Dominic Kelly. Dominic Kelly, the only guy that kind of fits that mold of a dude who basically you can just count as like one of the class of 2025 at this point. He is a guy from the class of 2025 who was committed to USC. Lincoln Riley's class fell apart. He transferred to Georgia, and he spent his freshman year at Georgia playing in 5 total games, and Georgia really screwed him. The 4th of those 5 games, he played 1 snap against Texas, 1 snap, which means if he had not played in that game, he would have been able to redshirt the year. But that 1 snap in that Texas game ruins it for him. Now, I got this in the comments. I do want to hit on this. There is an eligibility thing going around, and people think that this rule has changed, that you now have 9 games that you can play in and keep your eligibility. That is something that the coaches voted on. The coaches voted you could play 9 games and be able to retain your eligibility. And the reason that they did that, well, you know what? I'm going to do a separate show on and explain that, or a separate segment. My point is, it's not a rule. It's not a rule. The coaches voted for it, and it has not been passed by the NCAA. And Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, is not going to, he's not for it. So it's not going to pass. So if you heard that, because I had a couple people say that in the comments recently, it's not a rule. It was kind of presented in a lot of articles that I saw as if it was going to be the new rule. It's not. The coaches passed it at their coaches convention. It's not adopted by the NCAA. So you got four games still, plus the postseason. But I do want to talk a little bit more about that in another show or another segment. But literally 1 snap away from being able to preserve a red shirt. I don't know why they did that. It seems like a real gross lack of management. But when we talk about Dominic Kelly, he reclassified. So really, I mean, this is a young guy from Tampa, went to IMG to play his junior year, had all the offers: Oklahoma, Notre Dame, USC, LSU, Georgia, everybody but Ohio State. And the Buckeyes weren't after him coming out of high school. He was a top 250 guy at 247, top 200 guy at on 3. So a blue chipper with all the pedigree. He was the number 13 cornerback in the country. Freshman Jordan Thomas, number 18 cornerback in the country. So a high caliber player, and was able to get on the field 5 times at Georgia. And the Buckeyes wanted to bring in originally in this recruiting cycle 3 cornerbacks. We talked about CJ Bronaugh, who was the guy that committed to Florida that they were after at the end there trying to flip after Billy Napier got fired before they hired John Summerall. They hired John Summerall. He's able to hold on to CJ Bronaugh, and the Buckeyes end up with 2, Jay Timmons and Jordan Thomas. And we're just going to call this our 3rd. This is our 3rd freshman corner. So in comes our buddy Dominic Kelly, and I like him. 6'1", 190. I can tell you this. So Georgia brings in Gentry Williams out of Oklahoma, and he is a cornerback that's essentially going to come in and start at Georgia. And then they bring in another young corner, Braylon Connolly, out of USC. And Dominic Kelly says, forget this, I'm out. They did not want to lose him. They didn't want to lose him. Georgia fans were irritated that they lost him. They really, really liked him. And I went and read up a ton on their message boards and everything. Like, they're mad about this. This is one of the ones they're most mad about. This to them is kind of as incredulous as Ohio State fans were about a couple of the guys that we lost. Like, they're pissed about this. So that's very good. They thought this was a nice, bright, young prospect that you didn't need to lose. You could have kept him. So there we go. The Buckeyes get one they didn't want to lose. And another kid from a top tier school, which is another theme we're going to talk about. When we look at the cornerback room, when we look at BIA, and I got another stupid chart, and you guys can tell me if you like my stupid charts here. I kind of enjoy making them. Here's our BIA chart. You got Jermaine Matthews. You got Devin Sanchez. Then you got Cam Calhoun, who is your fourth-year guy, school number 4, the kid from Winton Woods. And I said, listen, I got to apologize about something. The other day I said, from Ohio, well, Cincinnati, kind of Ohio, and somebody said, hey, well, what's the deal with that? I love our Cincinnati Buckeyes. Love them. Love them. The problem is there is a large percentage of Cincinnatians who turn their back on the great state of Ohio and your brethren, and they act like Cincinnati Stew Ball, Cincinnati Stew Mandel, and they're just Buckeye haters, and you don't need to be that way. We're all Buckeyes. But that's what I meant when I said that. At any rate, apologized if that offended any of our Cincinnati brethren who are Buckeyes. Love you guys. Anyway, BIA, Jermaine Matthews, Devin Sanchez, your number 3 guy, going to be Cam Calhoun from Winton Woods. For a while, we'll see how long it lasts, because he's got Jordan Thomas, freshman out of New Jersey, out of Bergen Catholic, who also did great in that Navy game. Jay Timmons, freshman out of Pittsburgh, who is a total stud, the number 1 cornerback per Rivals in the country. And my hope that they supplant that dude. I would love to see them supplant him. But now when we look at the young guys with Jordan Thomas, Jay Timmons, and Dominic Kelly, you come to this realization where if we were looking at this room 2 years ago and we're looking at it just like now, we're saying, okay, well, next year, Jermaine Matthews is going to leave. Devin Sanchez will be in his money year, ready to go to the NFL. You got Jordan Thomas and Jay Timmons and Dominic Kelly, your young studs. Maybe Cam Calhoun comes back. Like, this room looks great the following year. And we just can't look at it like that anymore. And that sucks. That totally sucks, because let's be honest here. How many of these guys end up leaving next year? Who knows? Maybe 2, maybe 3. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. And I hate the new way that this goes. I hate the new way this is going to go. Like, it is good that you bring in Dominic Kelly, because it just creates that competition between him, Jordan Thomas, and Jay Timmons, and you got one more shot. Maybe he's better than the 2 of them. We don't know yet. What we do know is that one of them at least is likely to leave at the end of the year, whoever's at the bottom of that totem pole. So there it is. The ones who don't leave are the ones who will give confidence to the coaching staff that they should be treated like Devin Sanchez, Riley Pettijohn, Zion Grady, Epi Satanile, guys that they want to keep, and they make sure that they keep. And that's what it is now. That's what it is. So that wraps up most likely the class, the portal class. And when this thing first started, when the portal opened January 2nd, it's now closed right now as you're watching this. Understandably, that first 4 days were a very anxious time as we saw an exodus. And we have now seen 7 freshmen, 33 total guys, including 6 or 7 very likely starters this year, more if we're counting the next 2 years. And I thought what we were watching was a total shift in the plan, that Ohio State was reluctantly going into a new roster strategy of loading up with a lot more veteran transfers. And it's because you just can't keep 87% of your roster blue chips unless they're all willing to sacrifice and take less than market value. You just can't. It's just, and if they all want that market value and you were to give it to them, well, then that's not enough of your money that you're spending on the top of the roster. And it's not going to be competitive at the top. because you're too concerned about having all this depth. You just can't make it work with even some of the highest payrolls in college football. You couldn't possibly make that work. And they did pivot. They did focus on clearing up money that was sitting on the bench in 26 and probably would be sitting on the bench in 27. Any of those guys had to go. Guys that we had assumed were going to be starters, that they weren't 100% sure could be quality starters. They were going to bring in competition. Those guys weren't going to get starter money. That didn't work for all of them. And we watched some of them walk out the door. And that's just the way it had to be. And then they went in the portal with a real concise plan. As we look at these guys now that it's over, they zeroed in on not just veteran experience, but competition level as well. I want you to look at this here. Let me pull this up. So not just veteran experience, but competition level. I mean, take a look at this. 2 guys in their 7th year. We're talking about next year, the next season we roll in. What will these guys be in? There will be 2 guys in their 7th year. That's our tight end, Hunter Welsing, and running back, Jacoby Jackson. 4 guys in their 5th year. And that is going to be, never mind. My list is too sloppy to read. 4 guys in their 5th year, 8 guys in their 4th year. And that's huge. So you're looking at 12, 14 guys in their 4th, 5th, or 7th year. 14 guys of the 16. Then you got a 3rd year. That's your kicker. And the 2nd year is Dominic Kelly. So every single guy that's going to be intending on playing football is in his 4th year next year or more. And then when we look at where they came from, there are no Logan Georges in here. I mean, we're talking 6 SEC players, 3 Big Ten, 3 Big 12, 2 ACC. You got your second tight end, Mason Williams from the MAC, and then a wide receiver in Devin McEwen from the AAC, from UTSA, that they really believe in. They went with absolutely as sure of things as they could. I know what that guy's going to do when he gets here. And they went with very high floors. There is not risk here. They avoided risk as much as possible and tried to avoid risky contracts, rolls of the dice, nobody from Rice. You know what I mean? Like it's a really smart thing to do. I think that you really know what you're getting with a lot of these guys. And when we look at what they did, I mean, we've talked about, I want to pull up a graph here of not just who you lost, who you retained, and who you added, but just kind of visually looking at, as we've looked at what the defensive starting lineup looks like. I want to look at what it looked like before in our minds, before any of these new guys, and what it looks like with the guys that are probably likely to be replacing them in the starting lineup. So when we take a look here, starting with Edric Houston was likely your starter. Instead, now you've got James Smith, who's likely your starter, and Edric playing with him. So you're able to retain Edric, but you add James Smith. That's the number 1 defensive lineman in the portal, by the by, whatever that means, if it means anything to you. Really solid year last year. You know, it stands to reason that he's going to get better, and Larry Johnson does his best work with interior guys. So let's hope that happens. Then you had Will Smith, who is a guy who played really well last year, not quite big enough to eat up those double teams all game long. So you bring in John Walker from UCF, also a really good year last year. So you upgrade and are able to retain on the defensive line. At linebacker, you retain Riley and Peyton and everybody in the whole room. And then you bring in Christian Alliegro, who brings in something that you didn't have. You didn't have the 6'4" space eater that destroys guards who come out to block him. He's pretty good rushing the passer, not great in space, terrible in pass pro, but he fits a lot of things that you didn't have in there. And he'll be a starter probably, and you retain everybody. you bring in Earl Little, and you're not able to retain Bryce West. You bring in Terry Moore, and you're not able to retain Fahim Delane. But you got older. You know what you're getting out of those guys. And Fahim could very well end up being a star. Terry had a season in 2024 that Fahim dreams of having. Like that's his dream ceiling right there. Terry already did it once. Can Terry do it again? Hopefully. And you will only get 1 year of it if he can. But let's be honest, if Fahim is going to do that, it was not going to be this upcoming year. It was going to be 27. And we now have to start thinking a little more short-sighted because we don't know if you can keep him for 27. Does he blow up in 26? Then he wants way more money. You just don't know anymore. As far as Earl Little, when we look at all the new guys, and let's take a look at the key losses, the key retentions, and the key additions. When we look at the key losses, Aaron Scott, Bryce West, Fahim Delane, Jarquez Carter. Those are your key losses on the defense. Key retentions, guys that are going to be playing a lot. You retained Riley Pettijohn, Zion Grady, Peyton Pierce, Jalen McClain, Jermaine Matthews, Devin Sanchez, Will Smith, Eddie Houston, Kenyatta Jackson. And then you added John Walker and James Smith to the defensive line. Terry Moore, who's going to start at safety. All three of those guys will start. Quay Russaw, who is a piece you didn't even have. I can't even tell you who's going to back him up because there's nobody you have that is quite like him. Earl Little and Christian Alliegro. So those are your key defensive additions. There are more, but those are your keys that are going to play a lot or start. And when we look at the key additions versus the key losses, well, you tell me, did you upgrade? Were you too concerned with what's right in front of your face? Or is that kind of how you have to be now? Because you don't know if you can keep those guys the following year. I think of all those positions, when we look at all the guys that you brought in, the key upgrades, I feel pretty confident that all of them are not only upgrades, but really, really good players. The only one that I'm not super high on is Earl Little Jr. But Earl Little Jr. comes in and replaces a guy in Bryce West that I wasn't high on anyway. I also think that if you are telling me, all right, buddy, you can assemble a roster and you've got a weak link at one spot. One position is going to be your number 11 out of 11. I'm going to tell you, I want it to be where it was last year at nickel. So if Earl Little is the weakest link, he's at the right position to me. That is the spot where I'm going to put my number 11 of 11. All in all, I mean, this was a success to me. This was a success. And I know that there are people who feel like that a lot of these guys were bargain rack and whatnot. When you're bringing in a 15-man class, it could have been a 7-man class with higher tier guys, right? You could have gone and got better players, but only 7 of them. Or you could have got 10 of them that are pretty damn good and 5 more that can, potentially play some backup reps. Honestly, I'm the type of guy who is normally going for quality over the quantity. But if you do it like this, like either way works. There's good and bad with both strategies. And when I look at it like that, with key losses versus key additions, you got better, man. You just straight up got better in 26. And now when I look at the roster, and we'll look at the whole roster, offensive and defensive, and do all that when this is all totally done, because we're not sure it is yet. I mean, I think this roster is once again the starting roster, a top 5 roster in the sport, and a roster that can compete for a national championship. And now it's on the coaching. Who's going to be the offensive coordinator? That's what we roll into next. Is Matt Patricia going to get serious interest from the NFL? Is he going to leave? He's clearly waiting on that, right? He's clearly waiting to see, does somebody come calling? And it sounds like if they do, he's out, or else he would just sign the damn contract. It's clear that Columbus and the good time that he had coaching Ohio State this year was not enough for him to give that up. And it's clear that he wanted to come kick butt at Columbus, at Ohio State, and work his way back into the NFL. Like, all that's clear. It's just a matter of, does he get that opportunity? That's all we're waiting on. So we sit and we wait. Hopefully it happens sooner rather than later, because if he takes too long, then there's not much option for Ohio State. And this is the situation you run into. We talk about the good of bringing in these NFL guys. This is the bad. They want to get back. They always want to get back. And then you just unfortunately, have the situation when we talk about losing guys, like the Jim Knowles thing was just a different situation where you get a guy, you're at the peak of college football. We usually don't have guys leave to go take the same job, but we're going to continue to have guys get hired up in college football or with these NFL guys racing to get back to the NFL, like Chip, like potentially Patricia. And I think Patricia's back. I don't mean to sound doom and gloom on this. I think he is, but it's clear that he wants to go back, or else he'd have signed this thing already. And that's where we sit. And it's a product of success. The more successful you are, the more your guys are going to get poached. And we just need to get used to this. And that's the way it's going to be. But anyway, that's where we are right now, guys. I got to tell you, based on where this thing started with the portal class, how it felt early on as to where we are now, feels a lot better, a lot better. And if you call that sunshine pumping, I just laid out to you why I feel that way. That's why I feel that way. Could you have more? Could it be better? Of course. It could always be better and more. Always. I want more. Yes, of course I want more. But can this roster compete in 26 with that schedule? That's on coaching, bud. You want to talk about the issues on this team? The reason that Ohio State lost in the playoffs, lost the last two games, it is not personnel. I don't think it'll be personnel with this roster. If they don't get it done, if they fail to make the playoffs, if they fail in some games, it's on the coaching. And it's never been as important. It's never been as important to have great coaching. And Ohio State's coaching staff has been great. They have had letdowns. They can be great again. The guy at the top has been great. He's had letdowns. He can be great again. He showed us he can do it. Hope that's the guy that comes out next year from the rip. And that's where we're at. So appreciate you guys. We will do one more episode this week that I've been working on. We'll probably do that for the weekend show, and that'll be out Saturday. So look forward to that. And that'll be it for today. So I appreciate you. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Juck'Em Bucks out.